This is Cockpits and Cocktails. We use this podcast to share stories and talk about all things aviation and aerospace. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Cheers to you and enjoy. Well, good evening, morning, afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Cockpits and Cocktails. I am one of your hosts, Natalie flyGIRL Kelley. My co-host, Fly Alyssa, is actually traveling from, the High Sierra, some kind of fly-in that she is at. But I am very fortunate to be able to talk to Jolie Lucas. And Mooney Girl is how I first heard about Jolie. And it was probably at Oshkosh, 3 or 4 years ago. A nice little couple said, hey, you need to go meet Mooney Girl. And I did. I went to see her in one of the hangars and have been kind of following her and seeing, kind of trying to piece together what she does. I think it's very interesting how her business, her hobby, and all that stuff kind of mingle together. So we're going to talk about that. Welcome, Jolie.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to it. And I have my, it's Cocktails and Cockpits.
Yes.
Somebody gave me this wonderful
mug
with me flying over Oshkosh.
Oh my goodness.
In a photo shoot. So
that is amazing.
I thought I should have that available.
Yeah.
Given the nature of your podcast.
That's perfect. Now I'm very jealous because I don't have anything like that. That is a very unique item you have there.
It is. It's lovely. I'm happy to.
When I approached Jolie about coming on to the show, she was kind of like, well, what do you want to talk about? And she knows a whole lot about flying. I'm fascinated with her career and how she's kind of mixed together her passion for flying and aviation. So I just kind of want to hear from you, Jolie, and share with our listeners how you got into aviation.
Well, that's a long story, but I was raised in an aviation family. My father was a flight instructor in World War II in the Army Air Corps, and he flew out of Rankin Field, which is in Tulare, California, and some famous folks flew at that time. Tex Rankin, of course, who started the Air Academy, and then Sammy Mason is another one that is pretty well known. And so my dad was an instructor there, met my mom on a blind date and took her for a ride in the Stearman. And when she could handle the hammerheads and the different sorts of aerobatics, he knew that she was a keeper. So we always had a little airplane. Drove a very modest car, but I'm a girl that learned to drive a stick at an airport and used to go to airport days, airport events. And of course, we had a Belenka at first, and then we moved up to the Mooney later. And so that was our station wagon. We flew around the country to see relatives, went to Indiana every year, up to Seattle from California. And so for me, I was 16, I believe, when I first went for a commercial flight.
Wow.
So up to that, it was my dad making it look pretty easy. Yeah. And he's a very, very good pilot. And so I was later in life when I got my pilot's license, I was 38 years old. No, I take it back, 40 years old when I got my pilot's license. And so then I bought a Mooney and decided that was going to be the airplane for me. And I think Mooney owners are sort of crazy about the brand and the speed, the style, made in Kerrville, Texas. And so I got the idea that, those of us who are owners could be ambassadors for the brand. And so I first started Mooney Ambassadors, and we would go to airport days and events, have a bunch of Moonies there, upwards of 50 when we went to South Lake Tahoe, get people in the planes, start talking about being pilots and aircraft owners. And then Mooney Girls was born out of that with my teaching partner, Jan Maxwell, and we teach Right Seat Ready, which is a companion seminar. So got my private, and then I did what I think a lot of people might do. which is say, oh, I'm going to get around to that instrument training soon. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Well, it was, I think 12 years later when I finally.
Wow. Okay.
And living at the beach, it's something where we have this much fog and we're, on the ground going, oh, I wish we could leave. But I got that instrument rating in 2017 and got my commercial in 2020. And I'm going to be starting to work on my multi-engine soon. And yeah, so that's how I got into flying, was just being an airport brat.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me why, I love to hear, by the way, when women go and get their license later, because that just resonates with me so well, because it was later for me as well. Why did it take so long to get the license?
Well,
or certificate, I should say.
Right. I think for me, it was life, getting married, having babies, starting my career as a psychotherapist. And then I swear to heaven, we were at a airport day in Jackson, California. It's Jackson Westover. And my brother flew in his Bonanza, and my dad flew in his Mooney. And I just thought, what is wrong with this picture? I love to fly, and I need to do it. And that was in June, and I got my private in September, I think it was. So moved right through and learned to fly in the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon.
Oh,
natural wind.
So yeah.
What did I know about?
I know there's people that approach me and say, they have a young family and they're maybe in their late 30s or mid 30s, and they're like, I just can't seem to get it done. I really want to. And I just try to tell them, look, it's just not the right season. Sometimes you can't do it all, but that doesn't mean you're never going to be able to do it. Yeah. It's just timing is so important. I mean, I couldn't have done it any other time until my kids got older. It just wasn't possible. And I had kind of one of those moments, it sounded like you had, where it was just like, okay, now why am I not doing this?
Right.
Now I have time, I have the ability to do it. So now's the time.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think for a lot of females in particular, it's hard to give ourselves permission to be selfish. We are so used to being the hub in the family that keep all the spokes in line. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult for us to say, what about me? What do I dream about doing? Where's my passion? And so when I decided to do it, I also decided that I was going to try to fly 2 or 3 times a week with lessons, just to make sure I had that really good background. And started off with a female instructor and ended up with a male instructor at the end, and just really got quality education. And of course, it was 18 gust and 26 on my check ride. But so, and it happened for my commercial as well. It was 18 or so gust and 24 on my commercial. So that power off 180 landing is always interesting.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. So your IFR rating, that was really tough for me. And I pretty much went straight from private to the IFR rating. What was it like kind of with that long gap in between? Do you think that made it harder or easier?
I think that it made it harder in some ways and easier in other ways. So the harder part of it was with the amount of presentations I do and speaking and writing, I'm used to being the expert or the teacher or the instructor. Mm-hmm. And with my IFR, my instrument training with Mike Jesh, who's a wonderful CFII, I had to allow myself to be a learner and to have really, just give myself some grace. Mm-hmm. Because there were times where he'd say, where are you? And I was in my Mooney with no IFR GPS. So I learned on steam gauges, 2 VORs, glide slope, DME. So I learned.
Wow. Yeah.
On the gauges, and he'd
Yeah.
say, "What are you?" And at first it was like,
I don't know.
yeah, northeast of the Paradise VOR,
Yeah.
And I often say that I think when you put the visor on, that your IQ goes down about 30 points. So that was harder, to let myself fail, to let myself do poorly, also to congratulate myself when I nailed something, and to know that those things can kind of change over time. The easier part was I knew that I needed to block off the time, and I did every day in terms of study for the written, and then really got serious about it in the fall, late summer and fall of 2017, and got it, I think it was November 17th. And it was probably the hardest thing I've had to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, parented kids and she had elderly parents, and I think that the instrument rating was the best and the hardest. So I'm sorry to be so long-winded about that, but
no, that's okay. It's hard to explain because it is so challenging, and it's something. I mean, for me, it was just something I'd never even like looked at approach plates really. It's just like this just looks like Chinese to me. I mean, it was just so hard to grasp, and I wanted to get it so quickly, but so when you say give yourself some grace, it was just like I'm just not getting this, and I want to get it so bad.
right,
but it
right.
takes time.
Yeah, and I think that everybody kept saying there would be a time where it gelled, where it came together, and it would be easier. And I did not believe them at the time.
Yeah.
And then it happened. And he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm 20 north of the Paradise VOR on this radial." And it was just like, boom. And it just made sense. And now I look at it like a recipe. So when you're in the system, that you're flying a recipe, and then your plate is almost, your recipe, and you just do the steps.
Yeah.
And you're going to be okay. And I've had to use it down to minimums in smoke here in California, and in weather in Oshkosh and stuff. So
yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I've never thought about that.
yeah.
So what did your family think when you got your private certificate, and then when you went on your instrument? Were they just super excited? What was the whole family vibe then?
Yeah, of course, my dad was super excited when my mom and my dad, but dad being the pilot, was super excited when I got my private. And both my folks had passed by the time that I got my instrument. And I have to say that was sort of something I felt after the check ride, and I knew that I passed and had all the debrief. And he went to, the DP went to print the certificate, and I just started crying.
Oh.
Because, my kids weren't with me. Of course, I've got two daughters that are in the Pacific Northwest, and then my son here. But, my mom and dad weren't here. And I couldn't call them and tell them.
Yeah.
And it was full of emotion. But my dad was just so thrilled that I was doing the Mooney Ambassadors and Mooney Girls and touring with AOPA and having some articles and AOPA pilot and such. And he just said, there's just nothing you can't do if you work hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you get that instrument rating too, I mean, of course, when you're a private pilot, you do kind of feel like part of this family. And then not everyone gets their IFR rating. So when you go to that level and you know how hard it was and you get it, and then you think, wow, all these other people went through the same thing, you just feel instantly like bonded with these people.
Right. It is quite the club. And then I also felt that getting my commercial certificate, just that, of course, it's a VFR sort of certificate, but the professionalism that came with that, to be thinking not only of all the things that we have to think about, but to be thinking about what's the best route for my passengers?
Mm-hmm.
How do I have hard talks with them about how much luggage they're bringing or what they really weigh? And
Yeah.
in one of Martha King's videos, the King course on the check ride, she talked about, if you've got non-pilots, you're also being sort of an ambassador to aviation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what might be the safest way to go, but the most scenic way to go, or the
Yeah.
go. And when I got the commercial, it was like, it felt more like a pro pilot.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was
True.
sort of a change in my head.
It's just another level up where you just really start thinking about other people as well and their experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I have seen you've written articles and you have been at EAA Air Venture and you've done talks. So tell me about how all that came to be. What are you melding kind of your therapist career into aviation with these kind of seminars and things that you're giving?
Yes, I think you hit it on the head with the melding. As a licensed psychotherapist, I work with clients on the psychology of life and how we can have a happier, healthier life in which we know what our purpose is and our decisions fund that purpose. And then I was just fascinated by the psychology of flight.
Mm.
And so Rod Machado is one that is a hero of mine, and he's also got a background in psychology. And so I always liked the way that he presented things in a humorous and fun way, but you're also getting the message across. And I started working, well, I've always had a relationship with AOPA, it seems like. And then I asked to be able to present at Sun and Fun or at Oshkosh. And then I've toured with them when they were doing their regional fly-ins.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tend to look at the psychology of how we make decisions, how we motivate ourselves, how we understand our learning styles, and just try to give the best content I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I've given talks about exiting the hold. As instrument pilots, we know that if you're in a hold, you can be in a holding pattern for so long, and then you either need to go to your alternate or land. You can't stay stuck. And I think a lot of folks do that with their flying, is they I'm just going to get it next month, it's going to be better. When the kids are older, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
And stuck in that holding pattern. And then most recently, I've been doing Into the Alligator's Mouth, which is the psychology of making our personal flight minimums.
Yeah.
Came out experience as well.
Yeah. So between those two talks, which kind of break down into the out of the alligator's mouth or into the alligator's mouth?
Because
Okay.
what I interviewed 12 or 13 folks around the country. It was great to get my sort of mental Rolodex out, and I had pilots with 250 hours on up to 20,000 hour pilots.
Wow.
And I asked them questions about their minimums, their personal minimums.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have them? Are they written down? Do you ever review them?
Mm-hmm.
Do you fudge?
Yeah.
Do you fudge on your minimums?
What made you want to discuss that topic?
because I fudged on my minimums, probably.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
But it made me think. I was Pia Bergvitz is a friend of mine, and she's Flying Magazine and now an FO for an airline and a fellow Mooney pilot. And I was dropping her off in Camarillo, so it was just going to be a turn and burn where I dropped off Pia and then flew back to Santa Maria, California, which is where my home base is. And I knew that there was going to be a little bit of clouds, but what ended up happening on the way back, and it's only about a 25-30 minute flight, is the weather started going down.
Mm.
And so I knew I'd have to do an approach. Okay, no big deal. And I'm, bombing in there and thinking, well, now that you have your instrument rating for, I guess it was 2 or 3 years at that time, have you ever updated your minimums
Mm-hmm.
from when I first got my instrument? I had double the minimums. That was my minimum, is double the minimums.
Yeah. Okay.
And so as I was doing the approach, and it actually ended up being 50 feet above the minimum.
Wow.
That's the minimum on the chart.
Yeah.
I got to, and it was fine. I mean, I did fine. But I thought, nobody knows but me.
Yeah.
You just fudged on your minimums because I hadn't updated them.
Mm-hmm.
So then I asked these, 12, 13 people, and it was surprising because except for me and the airline captains that have 10, 20,000 hours, nobody had them written down.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like, I'll know.
Yeah.
Part of my interviewing them and part of the presentation was what I called the hidden gems, which are, what have you learned? What have you learned? Give us a gem of knowledge. And that was fabulous. And then I asked them about a pucker factor.
Oh.
About something you never want to repeat again.
Yeah.
I got these wonderful pucker factors. And so if you've seen the presentation on YouTube, and of course I was at Oshkosh with the Air Safety Institute doing it, the presentation in person, you can see some of the pucker factors.
Yeah.
And what my goal would be for folks is to think of your personal guidelines, your personal minimums as a living, breathing thing. Right after my dad passed away suddenly, my minimums would be higher, right? Because I'm grieving. And I didn't even end up flying for many weeks after he passed, because that's part of my minimums, is how am I doing as a person? And being a practicing psychotherapist helps with that, because I'm so used to assessing people with their mood and their energy and their sleep and stress and all those things.
Yeah. So. That's one of the things I think is the hardest to explain to people when I take friends or family flying, and to explain, let's say everything looks good, the winds are good, it's a beautiful day, the ceiling's super high, but maybe there's something going on, like I just had an argument with my son, or and those things are really hard to explain. I'm just not feeling 100% tip top, and I've got something really weighing on me, and there's so many of them are just like, well, I mean, what's the big deal?
Right.
The day will be fine. And then there's some that are actually, experienced pilots that are like, well, then we're not going. It's just like, that's just clear cut and dry. It's the people that really aren't in aviation, I would say, that don't understand it. And the minimums, now that you say that, I know I haven't updated mine since, I don't remember when, 2 or 3 years probably.
It's not, at first when I was asking folks, they thought I was talking about IFR minimums. And I'm like, no. Think of them as guidelines. What are your guidelines? What's your complement component? What at night? What do you need at night? And what's helpful is just to, and AOPA happens to have some really nice templates if you want to download them, but is to write them down. Yeah. Do you ask them about runway length or density altitude? Stress is one of those things which is interesting for folks, because a lot of times I hear people say, flying helps me relax. So if I have had a stressful day, it helps me to go fly. And that really is for mild stress. But if you get into moderate, severe, or extreme stress, we're operating with a very ancient low part of our brain that has about 3 options: fight, flight, and freeze. None of those, I don't want any of those having the yoke in my airplane.
Yeah, right.
So you're right. If you've had an argument with somebody, if you're grieving, the pandemic has been very, very difficult with folks because we're very social creatures, and we've had a lack of contact with other folks. And so you just have to know that you're not as sharp as maybe you think you are. And I think we need to assess our skill level and round down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
70% of us think we're above average.
I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
That way. Doesn't it?
Oh, I can totally believe that. Yes. Well, I know I just started flying as a contract pilot for a corporate aviation company here in Cincinnati. And my dad is a pilot. He was a professional pilot in the Navy, and then he flew for FedEx. And I was on a flight last week, and we flew down to minimums, and I haven't like flown down to minimums in a very long time. And I only did it one time, and I had two other pilots in the airplane with me, and I was telling them, about the situation. He said, you got to be really careful with these pilots. I was like, I trust this pilot. He's been flying a long time. So you got to be really careful with the ones that do have a lot of experience sometimes, because they tend to fudge a little bit and think, oh, well, it's got to be like, I'll just go 25 more feet or 50 more feet. And so he's like, don't just, be an innocent bystander, be paying attention, and you need to be ready to call them out if they're going too low.
And that was one of the pucker factors that came through when I was interviewing DPE up in the Pacific Northwest. And he's the one who came up with the into the alligator's mouth, because he said, how far are you willing to put your head into the alligator's mouth?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You can't get it out again.
Yeah.
He noticed was he had some VFR flight minimums in the Columbia River Gorge, and he was going to a check ride where he was the examiner, and of course the examinee was on the ground waiting for him, and he said, I needed 1,500 feet, and then I was down to 1,450, and now I'm down at 1,400.
Oh,
and
yeah.
what example?
Yikes. Yeah.
Example. Now you might think it's 100 feet. People go, oh, it's 100 feet. But I believe if you cheat on your minimums, you're cheating yourself.
Yeah.
So it's the other thing I want to say about that is there's a part of us that thinks that we can be sneaky and get away with stuff. That was part of my wanting to write the article that I wrote and then present the seminar, is that you are not special, except to your mother.
Yeah.
The rules apply to us. All of the rules: fatigue, oxygen, stress, airplane limitations, all of those things apply to us. And if we sneak or fudge, then it creates sort of an exception bias. Like, well, my crosswind component's 15, but I landed at 17 the other day. And so what happens is we start to have some creep in there. And that's why I think it might sound kind of stern, but I think we should write them down and stick to them. And if we're not sure about our abilities, to go up with an instructor, figure out what your crosswind capability is for you.
Yeah.
Than what's in the POH.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to let folks know that there is a sneaky side of us.
Yeah.
If I have.
So it's not like you're a bad person, because it's just kind of something that happens to everyone.
Right. It's like, if I eat one bag of Ruffles, nobody would know. Well, if I eat two, nobody else will know. And it's that sneaky part of us that is not, it's not the one that I want at the controls of my Mooney.
No.
I want the wise part, the front part of my brain that I don't share with reptiles.
Exactly.
I want that part on board.
Oh, well, I'm fascinated by, I love thinking about why people, it all I think when I was studying to be a CFI, it was like the fundamentals of instruction, and you're learning about all the different learning styles, and you're just like, man, you think everybody learns like you.
Mm-mm.
And that was one of the hardest things, is to be like, well, I don't even know how to deal with this person because I really don't understand how they learn. And I just think it's fascinating how people are so different, but they can be taught a totally different way and can still come out with the same result.
Yeah, I think that was part of the reason that I did the exiting the hold, is that what works for me, learning style wise, might not be your way. I learn best in a class in person, and I'm in the first or second row.
Yeah.
The way I learn best. And then people that I love and adore and respect, it's a book. They get the book and they read the book and it all makes sense. And there's everything in between. I've often said it's much like we take care of people when they're sick the way that we want to be taken care of when we're sick. So if you're a person that you want somebody just to put the bottle of water down and the Tylenol and leave them alone,
Yeah.
that's how you're going to take care of them. And they might be the person that needs you to go, oh, you're sick. Oh, that's so bad.
Yeah.
How are you? And,
Right.
I think it's the same way with learning, is that,
True. Yeah, you're gonna teach it the way you think that, because that's how you learn. The
right.
way you think that they learn just like you, and that's what makes being a CFI challenging, is trying to
I
do
bet,
different.
I bet. I've thought about going on and getting my CFI. I don't know if I'll do it, maybe, but it is. And I think presenting around the country, I try to hit all of those sorts of learning types in the presentations.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're easily and great sound, and also, an outline and bullet points to take home.
You would probably be a great CFI because you know so much. You have so much background knowledge on mental stuff.
What I thought about it for was not taking a student from, zero to private, but it might be interesting to do, IPCs or
Yeah.
do, different targets and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
With my clinical practice, I'm so busy as a psychotherapist, since most everything's virtual now,
Yeah.
that I wouldn't have time to allocate to, a
You
brand.
never know. You know what's going to happen. It could find.
Oh, and I thought about getting my advanced ground instructor,
Yeah.
because that's something that's sort of my wheelhouse with teaching. I
Mhm.
love adult learners. I really do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to get your multi, hopefully. Is that something that's definitely in the works? And
It's definitely in the works. I'm trying to find the right school for me.
Mhm.
And so I'm so lucky I got a scholarship from the 99s.
Nice.
And so I need to put it to work. And it's also something where I had to apply a personal minimum, because I was really going to start it. And then I really thought about how exhausted I am as a healthcare professional during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, do you really have the brainwidth for this right now? Do you have the bandwidth?
Yeah.
And so I put it on pause, but now I'm feeling like things are trending better. We're getting out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And so now what we do is we think about thinking about it, and then we think about it, and then we decide.
Yeah.
So I'm really getting close to
At that point, yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's training like in California? Is it hard to find a flight school? Is it are there a lot of them, or what is that
Well,
like?
lots of flight schools. Most of the major airports have a flight school, and even some of the smaller airports like San Luis Obispo has a couple of flight schools. And for me, I don't know how to say this the right way. I want to make sure that my education is A plus plus plus. So that means me connecting with an instructor so that they know how I learn, so I can tell them the truth when I'm not understanding something, instead of kind of fake it till you make it thing. So the relationships I've had with my instructors along the way, they're dear friends now, and people that I can tell the truth to, and I don't have to worry about appearing like I don't know what I'm doing.
Think about you, or judging you in some way.
Flight schools are opening back up, and of course the skies are opening back up to us as well. It's just me really finding a good situation, because I want to be able to write about the experience as well.
Okay.
Maybe I think part of my purpose in life is to try to inspire people to follow their passion. So I think writing about the process, like I did with IFR, will be good as well. So I'll put it out into the universe. So, the next days, I'd like to know where I'm going.
Yeah. So why the multi-engine rating? What are you hoping to, what's the future?
I believe that we need to be available for opportunity. So I need to, for me, it gives me more experience, more ability to, if somebody says, hey, we need a plane ferried here, or, we need somebody to fly right seat, that I would be available for the opportunity if I wanted to do it. And so I don't have any ATP sort of goals, but I thought the multi would be the next step. And then I would determine if I would go on and get a CFI.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was like flying to Oshkosh in the 1942 Norseman. I got a call from Brent Blue. He said, I need a right seat in the Norseman. I didn't even know what it was. World War II aircraft, and we chatted and got to know each other in terms of right seat, left seat pilot sort of thing. And I was like, yes. And so when you're available for opportunity and you're prepared and you're ready and you're eager, I think that we get these great opportunities.
Yeah. And I'm sure that was a great learning experience, right?
Right. It was fabulous. Big old radio engine, and it was like flying this little slice of history. So that's my multi. It's just so that I'll be available for opportunities that arise. And, I've got almost all of my hours, but 100 and some odd are in a Mooney. So I know.
Wow. So the Mooney is, you touched on that a little bit. I've never flown in a Mooney. I've heard things about the Mooney. I hear they're fast, and that kind of, there's like this Mooney, I don't know what the word is, but not groupies, but this kind of Mooney group. Once they're in, and you just love your airplane. What's so great about the Mooney?
Well, having been in a crash in a Mooney with my dad and my daughter and her boyfriend, I can definitely attest to the strength of the airframe. So it's, as I mentioned, it's handmade in Kerrville, Texas. I know the people that wired my plane. I know the people that sealed my fuel tanks. We're kind of crazy about the brand. Of course, there's the aerodynamic differences. So it does make it, a faster, more efficient airplane. And I like has a special spar that's one of the safest wings in GA, and it has a roll cage that kept me and my family safe. And so I love the fact that it's made in the United States, and that you can go to the factory and meet the people who made the plane. I love the innovation. So it's, my dad had a Mooney for 27 years, and then we had the crash. And so it was airport day, and we lost a cylinder on takeoff. And so we were cooking steaks that night, 7 o'clock. We went down about 10:30 in the morning, and no major injuries. We were grilling steaks. And of course, me being emotional, which is good, I'm crying because I felt like something I did or didn't do took his airplane away from him. And he said the only failure would be if you don't fly again. Because, I was banged up. I was left seat. And he said, metal can be replaced. there are no funerals being planned today.
Yeah.
And so a week later, I was up with my flight instructor and a warrior, kind of crying the whole time. And I never looked back.
Mm.
Yeah, I got some counseling, of course.
Yeah.
It was a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
But the Mooney protected us all the way to the ground. We took out 7 trees and they ended up on top of us.
Wow.
And we upside down in a pond.
Wow.
So I can say to you and to anybody listening, that's the only airplane I'll ever own.
Wow.
So
okay. So I can't, the crash, you got back in a week after this happened. So you blew a cylinder. Tell me a little bit more about the actual incident. Did you just take off? What was happening?
Taking off Hood River, Oregon. It was airport day. So, there's just hundreds of people on the field. And we were flying my daughter to Eugene, to University of Oregon, go Ducks. And so when I was on the takeoff roll, I said, I pull at 65-70, right? And he said, yep. And so I'm on the takeoff roll, and it just didn't feel like it was accelerating quite as much as I thought. But I only had 5 hours left seat at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pulled, and we sort of lumbered into the air.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some 100-foot trees and, up and over those. And we're headed towards Mount Defiance. And so the terrain just kind of goes up and up and up to the mountain. And it was pretty clear that we were not going to fly that day.
Mm-hmm.
It just, we were going about 55, 60 miles an hour. And I was looking at a tree right in front of us, and I thought, I'm going to bank and try to miss the tree, which I did. And again, with the train rising and us not rising, I just decided at one point, I told the children, well, they're teenagers or young adults at that point, I said, brace yourself, we're going to land in the trees. So I cut the throttle and pitched up into a landing flare, and we started impacting trees about 50 miles an hour. The eyewitness said that the last tree just sort of hung us, suspended us in space, and then we fell backwards and twisted around, and then the trees that we hit, they landed on top of us.
Yeah.
It was the number 1 cylinder valve came unseated, and so suddenly we're a 3-cylinder airplane, loaded. We were not over gross, but and what the FAA told me was that when 1 cylinder goes down, it robs power from the other 3. And so I didn't try to turn around. I didn't try to go back to the airport. I just went straight ahead. And like I said, we all walked out, and we were grilling steaks by 7.
Wow.
To me, that airplane was part of the reason that we all
walked away.
Really a scratch.
Wow. So,
yeah.
Huh. Well, that is
quite a story.
Yeah. I'm impressed that it was a week later and you got back in the plane. Was that hard for you to do?
It was. I had black eyes, and my tooth had gone through my lip when I hit the glare shield. Dad didn't have shoulder harnesses. That was one of the first things I did when I bought my Mooney. Shoulder harnesses. It was hard, and it was with my primary instructor, Dave Cable, and he was just solid as a rock, right? And I was calm and I was focused, and like I said, I was crying a little bit. And we flew up to Yakima for the $100 hamburger, Washington, and I swear it was the best landing I've ever had in my life.
Focused probably, and
So it took some time, especially doing stalls. When you're doing a flight review. And emergency procedures and stuff, the attitude of the stall would bother me.
Yeah.
And I worked through it. And like I said, I got professional help, and I'm happy I did.
Yeah.
And And so I made my mom and dad proud in that way.
Yeah.
That I quit, and I went on to
It's awesome.
become affiliated with Mooney and AOPA, and trying to keep the word out that
Yeah.
you need to take this seriously and have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Mooney Girls, what is it exactly? And how do you, is this like, how do you reach other women and have this Mooney Girl group?
Yes. Well, we decided that, female pilots are only about 6 or 7% of the pilot population. And when Jan and I talked about it, what we liked was that nobody could tell us what to do, right? We could be a jeans and t-shirt girl. We could have high heels and be sassy, and we can fly those airplanes and,
Yeah.
be all that. So
Yeah.
we decided to form Mooney Girls, and part of it is our educational wing, in which we teach Right Seat Ready, the companion safety seminar.
Yeah.
We've had, I think, 6 folks that have come through that have gone on to become pilots. About 90% of Right Seat Ready are females, and about 10% males. And so basically we're covering what you need to know if your left seat pilot, has ate a bad fish stick and is throwing up, or got a migraine or something.
Yeah.
So with Mooney Girls, it's about the attitude that we can do or be anything we want to be to support other females that want to become pilots or mechanics or dispatchers, ATC. And it's been a lot of fun. We've been about 11 or 12 years now.
Wow.
So it's and then with COVID, everything got a little derailed. So we're hoping to start in-person stuff in 2022.
Yeah. So is the Right Seat Ready just geared towards Mooney airplanes, or can it be used for others? Okay.
That's a great question, and I should have made that clearer. We have a Mooney specific Right Seat Ready course, and Jan, my teaching partner, she owns a Mooney service center in Texas, and so she's got the knowledge from being around the mechanics and the maintenance part. I have the psychology part, and we both have owned and flown Mooneys for many years. So we have a Mooney specific, and then we have a single engine course, all airplane is what we call it. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be for single engine, but we've developed a laminated checklist for them to have that they can write on and follow along. And it's so funny because I had a fellow that came up to me at Oshkosh, I think it was. He goes, "I have to tell you this story." And I'm like, okay. My wife went through your Right Seat Ready course with Jan. I said, "How great." And so we're driving to the airport, have this trip. And she says, "Stop the car." And he's like, "What? What?" And she goes, "We need to go back home." And he's like, "What?" She said, "I don't have my checklist."
Oh, no.
I need to have it. And I love it because when we're teaching the course, we're teaching them how to look at a manifold pressure gauge, how to look and and how to navigate and how to communicate, how to get that airplane on the ground safely so that you all can get the medical attention that you need. But she would not go unless she had her checklist. And so that's one of the fun things about the course.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I think that, because I remember when I took my mom flying kind of early on when I got my license, and she enjoyed it. And then she went home and she called me. She said, "I have to tell you that I just watched this show and this pilot became incapacitated. And the next time I go, you need to teach me how to land in case something happens to you." And so it made me think, okay, well, not just her, but what if I'm going with my kids and taking my kids? There's some basic things that, they kind of need to know.
Absolutely. And with the Mooney courses that we've done, we've oftentimes have a simulator there. Whether it's at the Mooney factory, we have a Redbird, but in other ones, we bring our home simulators with yoke and rudder pedal rudders. And it's really nice to get our students on the simulator and get them some practice with what it feels like. And then we oftentimes say, to go up, let's say that you have a Cessna or Bonanza or Mooney, to go up with an instructor for that type of aircraft, not your spouse or partner.
Yeah.
You're going to sit in the right seat and get a lesson in emergency. And that way we're ingraining some of that into them. But it's amazing to see the beginning of the day and the end of the workshop, the difference in, competence.
Yeah.
And go along with their checklists.
Yeah.
And they'll point things out, and it's awesome. So
that's great. I think I would think it would. There's so many benefits to that. Like one, they can really fully appreciate what the pilot is thinking about and try to help relieve some of that stress. Two, they feel a part of the flight and they can engage in it and understand. And three, maybe they really develop a love of aviation and decide, I think I want to learn more. I think this is awesome. And yeah.
Absolutely hit it on the head.
Yeah.
All three of those things. And when we lessen someone's anxiety, and remember, with anxiety, we've got fight, flight, and freeze. Yeah. That's about it. When we can lessen their anxiety, and when I feel like, oh, I can look at that gauge and I remember what that does, and that red is bad and green is good and yellow is caution, and be a part of it, maybe changing frequencies, maybe doing some radio work, being another set of eyes when you're in the soup and looking for the things that you need to see to be able to land. Then it's like, wow, I've always wanted to go to Catalina, or I've wanted to go here or there, do a Hudson tour or whatever it might be. And then I'm excited about it instead of anxious.
Yeah, right.
You know what the difference is between anxiety and excitement to the body, to your brain? Nothing. It's the same. What's the difference? My thought layer. So if I love roller coasters and I'm standing in a roller coaster line, I'm going to be excited. If I hate roller coasters and I'm standing in a roller coaster line, I'm going to be anxious.
Yeah.
Same chemicals, same, brain chemicals and corticosteroids and adrenaline, all that's the same. So the difference is what we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I would say knowledge, just kind of is a huge key there, and you're lessening your anxiety and making it fun versus being like a nervous, anxious wreck about it.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to getting back to being with people in 22 when it can be a little safer and we can gather again and continue on with that part of our, aviation family.
Yeah, I agree. Me too. I want to say something. I wrote something down too about Rod Machado. I've never met him. I don't know much about him, but when we were talking about how you learn, when I was just kind of reading just a textbook about flying, I had a real hard time kind of grasping it, and I would just get so like trying to keep my eyes open, and it was just like, this is so boring. But when I picked up, someone recommended Rod Machado's book, and I got it. It was the Private Pilot book. I don't know what it's called exactly. Private Pilot something. And it was funny. And so it kept me like engaged, and I just loved how he kind of mixed the sense of humor and the flying. So if anyone kind of learns that way, like has a hard time reading and grasping it, I think that made a huge difference for me.
It does. And way back in the day, he had cassette tapes.
Yeah.
Where talking about things, and then it was VHS tapes, and then to be able to see him in person and get to know him. He's a fellow Portuguese guy, like I'm a Portuguese gal, and he's just a fabulous person. And we're so lucky that we have all these different modes, right? Whether it's King or Machado or Enziero, or it's finding what works for you.
Yeah. Right.
There are some folks that just like, I just want the facts. I just want the facts. I want to read the book, or I want, and that's it. And for me, I think that's part of the reason that I became a psychotherapist, is that I've always been intensely interested in people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when Rod is describing something, or John and Martha are talking about, when they landed in Santa Barbara, we're surrounded by police cars, and John said, "I knew my landing was bad, but I didn't think it was criminal." You remember these things.
Yes, totally. Definitely. I wish I could just read it and learn it. It just seems like it would be so much more productive, but it's just not how I work.
The female brain's wired a little differently. So we're wired to want connections.
Yeah.
So we like to have a fact that's connected to imagery, and it's all connected.
Yeah.
And males tend to have more like a waffle brain, where everything has a little compartment.
Wow.
So that's part of the some of the
learning there.
Yeah. The shops I've done is just explaining those differences between the male and female brain.
Yeah. One thing I know, we are lucky, like you were saying, because YouTube, you can find, if I was struggling with a particular subject, I can get on YouTube and I'll watch a video. Well, that didn't quite hit it. And then I'll find someone else, and then the way they teach it actually hits. So, we have all those resources now to find something that actually caters more to your learning style by just Googling and getting on YouTube.
You bet. Yeah. And nowadays we can find almost anything if you want. Mm-hmm. Rod has a landing technique. I call it hunting. I don't think he calls it that. But when you're in the flare, you start moving the yoke back and forth. And it just makes for these really perfect landings. And and he's got a video on that. And again, I use the word hunting, but he probably uses a different word. But to be able to learn from these experts, and it's right at our fingertips. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. And everybody learns differently. So
yeah, right. Okay, well, I think this has been great. So I've learned a whole lot, and I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more on this video chat. I look forward to hopefully seeing you at some of the air shows in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if anybody were to want to contact me, my website is jolielucas.com, and you can find out where I'm going to be and what I'm presenting and all that. And so I think it's fabulous what you guys are doing. I love the podcast, and
thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I too enjoy hearing people's stories, and I just think it's great. Everybody has a story. When people hear, maybe about your crash, you just never know what's going to hit someone and really speak to them. Maybe they hear about your crash and then they think, well, okay, that's a way to look at it, and it's not the end of the world, and I can learn from that, and I can just keep going. And there's just, you just never know. Somebody's story is going to resonate with someone, and I think that you're doing wonderful things, and I'm so envious because you're doing like everything.
Well, it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun, and sometimes I'm tired, but it's always a happy tired.
Yeah.
And that happens when you follow your purpose in life, right. When you know what it is, and you make choices around that. So it's been quite the journey. I never thought that some of these things would happen, but it's fabulous because I was prepared and interested and available. So
right.
Keep that in mind too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much again. I hope you have a great rest of your day there in California. Yeah, I will be getting ready for bed soon.
Yeah, I've got a few more hours of daylight here at the beach. So
enjoy. Thank you very much, Jolie. I'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye.